Hello and welcome to the HR Like a Boss podcast. I'm your host, John Bernatovicz. I have embarked on a journey to get to know amazingly awesome HR and business professionals with the hope to find out what it takes to do HR like a boss. If you enjoy the show, please make sure that you subscribe and hit that 5-star rating. Welcome back again to the HR Like a Boss podcast. Super excited to be joined by Annie Margarita Yang. Annie is an author and an expert in some really cool stuff that I thought applied to our audience around job seekers and what they're looking for. So Annie, welcome to the HR Like a Boss podcast.
John, thank you so much for having me on HR Like a Boss podcast. I'm so excited to be here today to talk with you about how to do HR.
In your book, you talk about at least in your particular case, this ambitious attitude you had, this character of hard work ethic that I'm sure you got growing up, and all the things in your earlier stage of your life. So what are some of those pieces of infinite wisdom that you suggest to candidates on how to get a job in 5 days? Like what's the Cliff Notes version of your book?
Cliff Notes version. First of all, you have to figure out where you're missing your skills. Like, in what aspect do you have a skill gap? See, a lot of people, when they're looking for a job, they're looking at this checklist of requirements that are in the job listing, and then they start going like, well, I don't know how to do this, I don't know how to do that. I mean, if you've been working for a while in the real world, right? You're not just fresh out of college, but if you've been working for a couple of years, that was your chance to actually have closed that gap, to progress in your skill. You can't expect your employer to teach you everything, right? So one of the things that I recommend is, when you're not actually already looking for a job, to actually prepare well in advance and learn those skills in your own time. So go on those job listings, take a look, analyze 20 of them for that future job that you're looking for. And then, actually, this is a new tip that wasn't in the book. Shove that into ChatGPT. Ask ChatGPT, please analyze this job listing. What are employers looking for? What kind of skills? Analyze 20 of them, and then take a look at all 20 analyses and look at what you're missing. Make an entire list of what you are missing, and then take courses. Learn. That is one of the first things you can do to become a candidate that can land a job offer in 5 days.
Let me just point out, or maybe go back to when you got that first accounting job that you didn't have an accounting degree for. Did you take your own advice at that time and work on some of the skill gaps that you had around what does GAAP mean in accounting? What is a financial statement? What's a profit and loss? Like, how did you specifically do that in your job search that then provided you the motivation to say, hey, I figured this out, let me write a book about it?
I did have skill gaps. I didn't know what I was doing. I was initially working as a bookkeeper. Bookkeepers, a lot of them, they don't know how to do journal entries because they think QuickBooks is all there is to it, and they know how to do data entry. But something that I kept coming across was the fact that I didn't know how to make reports. I didn't understand how all the data entry that I was doing ended up feeding into the system to pull out those reports. Like, how did these numbers come about? And what is this journal entry that people keep talking about? How do I do adjustments? I don't understand. And quite frankly, I was getting embarrassed, and I was feeling inferior, as if like I'm incapable. Maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I'm not smart enough. And I wanted to fill in this gap. So I went on accountingcoach.com, and every day for an hour, I just read through the articles. It's created by an accounting professor at some university, but he gives away the information for free. So I figured, okay, if I take this, maybe I'll learn how to do journal entries. And I did. I took that information and then I applied it to what I was doing at my job. And the CPA that was looking at the books was like, this is perfect. I don't spot any mistakes in your work. And then when I got another job, I found more gaps. Basically, like, I didn't know how to use the software. We were using AppFolio. It's not really an accounting software, but it's a property management software with accounting functions built in. And a lot of people in the industry in accounting, we use QuickBooks, but AppFolio was completely new to me. So what I did was, an hour every day at the end of my workday, I watched the AppFolio training videos. I went in their database, I looked at their help guides, read every article in there, and then I just sat down and I took notes. And then after doing that for a couple months, I looked over all my notes, and then I went to my boss and I said, hey, there's a lot of features you're not using. I think you can run your operation a lot more efficiently if you could implement this feature, that feature. Maybe you're not taking advantage of this right now. Have you heard of this? Did you even know the software could do this? Right? So a lot of the gaps that I found were actually from the day-to-day job that I was doing, along with reading help guides from the software that we were using. And then I just learned how to use it.
You had one piece of advice to somebody that's going on a final interview about a job that's going to give them $35K more than what they're making in their current role. What's your number one suggestion that they should do on that final interview?
That final interview, I think you need to walk in with confidence. I think a lot of people, they don't come in with this sort of like attractive magnetism, charisma. They're too busy thinking like, oh, do they like me? I hope they like me. I hope they think good things about me. No, it is not. Those interviews, it's not about testing your confidence. No, the interview is not about testing your competence. Okay, you're already qualified. That's why you got the interview to begin with. It's more about, will you get along with everyone else? Are you a team player? Or are you someone who's difficult to work with? Are you shy? Like, what kind of person are you? That's what they're really looking at. So you have to go in there with confidence. And the way you do that, here's a certain mindset shift, is you say, I don't need to work here. I want to work here. And that makes all the difference. The fact is, if you already have a job and you're looking, you don't need to work there, or wherever you're interviewing. Even if you're unemployed, you don't need to work there. You can stay unemployed. You have to deal with the financial consequences of not getting the job, right? But you always have options. At the core end of it, you don't need to work there. So if you think about it like that, I don't need to work here, I want to work here, you will walk in with confidence.
How would you describe someone that does HR like a boss?
I'll describe somebody who I wish was my boss and did HR like a boss, because I always see an improvement, and I haven't had that dream boss or someone who did HR like a boss before. Let me tell you what I wish someone was like. Someone who actually asked me what I enjoy doing at the job. How can I make the job better, right? And actually implement ways to make my life easier at this job. Someone who actually wants to develop talent. Someone who comes in with a training manual. You know how many jobs I go in there, there's no training manual. They just say, hey, we hired you, you have experience, figure it out yourself. There's this learning curve, and how many people have a training manual in place? They don't, So me personally, when I started hiring and I formed my own company, I made a training manual. Everything was written down, the standards, how I wanted something to be done, so that the expectations were set. And I think somebody who does that can do HR like a boss.
So Annie, Margarita, Yang, thank you so much for being on the HR Like a Boss podcast. I hope you enjoyed your time.
Thank you so much, John. That was a great summary, and I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity to interview.
Thanks for checking out the HR Like a Boss podcast. If it resonates with you, please leave a rating and review, or better yet, subscribe and share with a friend. Until next time, let's continue to aspire to do amazingly awesome HR.